Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Huddersfield by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson and Patrick Aanholt after the game. So let's begin. Crystal Palace secured all 3 points at a sunny Selhurst Park thanks to second half goals from Luka Milivojevic and Patrick Aanholt against Huddersfield Town. On the first match day that the Premier League launched their No Room for Racism campaign, the game against Huddersfield Town was also one that the Eagles knew there was no room for error in. The opening 10 minutes saw much of the game bogged down in the middle of the pitch, with neither team able to get a strong foothold on the game. Wilfried Zaha was looking to stretch the Terriers' defensive line whenever the Eagles gained possession around the centre circle, but a couple of shrewd interceptions from the Huddersfield captain, Christopher Snyder, stopped Zaha in his tracks. On the 13th minute, a wonderful 1-minute tribute broke out all around the sections of Selhurst Park, in remembrance to former Palace Foundation player Damari Dawkins, who sadly passed away at the age of 13 after a battle with leukaemia. In what would have been a fitting tribute to young Damari, Andros Townsend broke down the right-hand side whilst the applause was ringing out around Selhurst, but the Terriers' defence recovered to stifle the English winger. The first real chance of the game emerged in the 16th minute, after some superb interplay down the left-hand side between Patrick Aanholt and Zaha, with the former's incisive pass finding Michy Batshuayi inside the box. The online Belgium international dropped his shoulder to find a yard of space, and as Selhurst rose in expectation, German defender Eric Dum heroically threw his body in front of the striker as the ball looked destined to find the back of the net. The Eagles had to wait less than a minute later for the next chance, with Jeffrey Slupp taking a defence-splitting pass in his stride, but the Ghanaian international unfortunately lost his footing as he drew back his left leg. Palace were firmly on top now, with their third chance in just 4 minutes arriving via the foot of Townsend. His cross from the left-hand side found Zaha's head at the back post, with the Ivorian's effort going agonisingly wide of Hammer's post. The Terriers' first chance of the game fell to Chris Lowe, with Huddersfield capitalising on some uncertainty in the Eagles' back line to orchestrate a 3-on-2 scenario. However, Lowe, unmarked inside the box, was unable to find his way past Vicente Gaeta. Lowe and the Terriers were kicked into life however, and just 2 minutes later Gaeta was again called into action, this time via the left foot of Lowe, with the Eagles' number 1 saving smartly down to his left. A couple of efforts from each team, Slupp and Alex Pritchard respectively, kept the game ticking over before a Maradona-inspired moment of magic from Batshuayi teed up for Aanholt, who found Townsend, with the Eagles' winger's shot from just outside the box smartly saved by Hammer. Moments later, in the 37th minute, an overhit pass on Aanholt saw Huddersfield's Karlan Grant nip in front of the returning Scott Dann. Thankfully for Palace, the January signing miscued his dink over Gaeta, and the rest of the first half played out without any notable moments. A half-time sub from Roy Hodgson saw Max Meyer replaced by James McArthur as Palace looked to break the deadlock. That moment almost came in the 53rd minute thanks to the slick feet of Zaha, who danced his way past 2 Huddersfield defenders, which created an intricate passing move inside the Terriers' box. That resulted in a bending Aanholt effort towards the top right-hand corner of Hammer's goal. Unfortunately for Palace, Hammer was equal to the effort. A deflected 56-minute effort from Batshuayi brought about a corner, and after a few phases of play that included a punch from Hammer and a header back into the danger area from Townsend, it all ended with a wonderfully taken volley from James Tompkins outside the area that was sailing into the bottom corner if it had not been for the scrambling Hammer. Minutes later, Zaha dazzled the Terriers' defenders again, cutting out 4 of them at once with a delightful pass to find Townsend unmarked inside the box. However, the Eagles man saw his chance go narrowly wide. A minute later, and this time some great work from Batshuayi ended with the forward somehow toe-ending the ball to Zaha. The winger was unmarked on the left, but the Selhurst favourite was unable to successfully round Hammer before the Terriers retreated to close out the danger. That near assist from Batshuayi was to be the striker's last involvement, with Hodgson bringing on Batshuayi's international counterpart Christian Benteke, with the manager looking to capitalise on a flurry of chances falling the Eagles' way. The breakthrough came in the 75th minute, with Palace's second half dominance coming to fruition when the referee Lee Probber pointed to the spot after Zaha was brought down. Up stepped the ever-reliable Luka Milivojevic, who calmly sent Ben Hammer the wrong way to send the Homestead Road faithful into raptures with his 10th goal of the season. The noise levels would not drop for the rest of the game as Palace went in search for the game-killing second goal, which duly arrived in the 88th minute, with Aanholt slotting neatly through the legs of Hammer after being teed up by Zaha. Hodgson's side comfortably saw out the remainder of the game to get back to winning ways and condemn the Terriers to relegation from the top flight. So now I'm going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like myself who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts on both Twitter and Facebook, then of course do head over to the respective sites and follow our accounts on there. Now in terms of the latest Palace news, we obviously regularly update our account with the latest transfer news, so even though we're not in a transfer window now, there are lots of rumours about players coming in and out that you may be interested in. So in terms of the news we have, we obviously can narrow it down in terms of transfer news, and I would personally say, obviously don't want to seem big-headed, but I think we're quite good at sourcing transfer news, getting it out there as quick as possible, and of course starting a debate whether that be about players coming in or out. Alongside that, we obviously have interviews and obviously general club news as well. So in terms of interviews, whether that be with players, whether that be with staff, whether it be with management, anyone sort of, I suppose, giving their opinion on Palace, we of course will post that on there. And in terms of general club news, that sort of stuff about the academy, the ladies team, and maybe even the stadium as well, you know, as that sort of comes along. So if you do want a place to get all of this sort of latest Palace news, you know, transfer news, interviews, and obviously stuff about the stadium, etc., of course do head over to our Twitter account at Crystal Palace. Of course you can follow us on there, and of course, you know, if you want some news articles as well, you can follow us on Facebook as well. Now alongside this, on our Twitter account, we obviously post our own opinions as well. So there's a guy on there who runs the page. Obviously I do the podcast, but a guy on there who runs the page, and before the game, after the game, he'll give his sort of instant match reaction, you know, after the game, before the game, give you his sort of reaction to the lineups, and even sort of press conference day, you know, give you sort of his thoughts of the game, how we think it's going to pan out, you know, in terms of injuries we've got and things like that. So if you do want another Palace account to follow on Twitter, of course do head over there at Crystal Palace, follow us on there so you can get all of our sort of opinions as a page. And I would highly recommend it, certainly before the game, where we have a few polls, we ask for people's opinion. So if you do want to get involved in them sort of things, as well as obviously reading our own opinion, then of course feel free to do so. Now another great place for you guys to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10, and that is of course with 10 being the best. Now the main reason I want you guys to do that is that I've got my general opinion of the game, how I thought the players performed, and obviously how I've rated them. But rather than me just having my own opinion, I want you guys to post and share your own opinion in the YouTube comments, so that I can read through it and compare how you thought the players performed to, you know, how I thought they performed, and so we can have a little bit of discussion based on that. And even if you don't want to comment below with your player ratings, or even if you're a Huddersfield fan, you know, comment below with your general views of the game, you know, what you thought about the first half, why you think we're just so much better in the second half, why you think we can't, you know, finish our chances, and I'm talking about the Townsend and Zaha ones in particular. Anything about the game alongside your player ratings that you do want to share, feel free to do so. And obviously, like I've said already, it's mainly so that I can come back to the video, and rather than having my opinion, I could read your guys' opinions on the game and sort of build a broader view of the game. But even, you know, alongside that, it's all about discussion as well. So if you've got something you want to ask me, you've got a question for me, or you just want to, maybe you disagree with something that I've said, comment that below as well, so we can have a discussion in the comment section. And it's not just so I can read it, but it's also any other fans, whether they be Huddersfield or Palace fans, when they come to the video to listen to the podcast, they can also read the comment section to hear what other fans are thinking as well. And once again, that's just to build a broader view of the game. Now if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned, or join our Facebook group, then do check all links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting to go with Vicente Gaeta, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of Gaeta's performance, I suppose the last sort of few weeks or so, you know, especially after the Watford game, there was a little bit of debate, albeit not too serious, but whether, you know, Gaeta should be dropped again and Hennessy comes back into the side. And that's just because of the goals we conceded at Watford. They were obviously quite avoidable, and maybe Gaeta should have done better. But aside from that, I think this performance here, I've given him a 7 because he's come into this game here, even though the criticism was only by a minority of people, it was there nonetheless. But the fact that we went out with our strongest 11 and Gaeta done his bit to get a clean sheet was of course the thing that really did impress me. Now I might as well start with the fact that he kept a clean sheet, because obviously we've kept quite a lot of clean sheets this season, 10 in total, which is the same as Tottenham have got. So just in terms of a perspective, just shows how good our defence has been this season. But the main thing that impressed me with the clean sheets is just the key moments in the game where Gaeta was key to us keeping that clean sheets. Now, what I mean by that is that at certain points at 0-0, Huddersfield had lots of chances to get through on goal or cut inside and have shots, And ultimately they did do that because we weren't quite on top of their threat in that first half. And when they did do that, Gaeta was there to, you know, save the day essentially and keep it at 0-0. So whilst you could say, yep, it's collectively as a team performance, we probably deserve to keep a clean sheet, actually Gaeta in particular was the guy who done it, because if it weren't for his crucial saves, you know, getting down low, positioning himself well, stretching, if it weren't for that, we probably would have been 1, maybe even 2-0 down at half time, lost a clean sheet already, and it would have been an uphill battle. So the fact that at 0-0 in particular, he played his part really importantly to keep the clean sheet was of course great to do that. And like I've said already, you know, it wasn't just the fact that the defence was quite good, because, you know, certain players in the defence were a little bit shaky. It's just the fact that individually he did well to do that, and he done what you would expect from him. And when you consider people were saying maybe Hennessy should come back into this game, also because of the height advantage, because obviously Huddersfield have got a little bit of height in the attack, it was nice to see Guy to come in, perform so well, and prove to us once again the quality he's got. Now, in terms of a few stats from the game, obviously he made quite a number of saves, but it was 5 in particular, which, you know, it doesn't seem a lot, but when you look at other games and you look at, you know, goalkeepers' contributions, 5 saves is quite a not necessarily a big amount, but it's a significant amount, because if he hadn't have made these 5 decent saves and obviously a few of his sort of catches and punches away, maybe, like I've said, the game could have been a different story. So these 5 saves in particular, most of them in that sort of first half period, you know, the fact that he just got down low, parried the ball away, and there was one in particular where I can't remember the Huddersfield player's name, but he cut inside, obviously aiming for his far right corner, and of course Gaeta got down low and parried it away, sort of, yeah, mid-air. So that one in particular just is quite crucial, because if that goes in 1-0, sort of midway through that first half, would have been a completely different story. So the fact that Gaeta was solid throughout the rest of the game, made really key important saves at 0-0, whilst also, you know, maintaining our clean sheet once we got ahead, and just helped us to see the game out, was of course something that was a little bit impressive for me. And like I said already, even though he wasn't necessarily as commanding in his area as you would like from him, the fact that he won a few punches, got the ball out of danger, you know, yes, Huddersfield may have gotten back on the end of the ball after that punch, but at least he just cleared the danger rather than faffing about inside the box, so of course that was a good thing. Now I suppose the only thing really that is stopping me giving him an 8 as opposed to a 7 is just the sheer fact that maybe his kicking was a little bit off, and I know this is something that people have picked up on quite a lot recently, but I suppose that's one thing I suppose negative about his performance, because everything in terms of his goalkeeping, in terms of making saves, making punches, you know, having his positioning right, that was all good. It was just the kicking from set pieces, whether that be goal kicks or free kicks, his kicking was a little bit off, going out of play, or not finding, you know, a Palace man. So maybe that's something to work on, and like I've said, that's the reason I've limited him to a 7 as opposed to an 8. But like I said already, a very impressive performance from him, and once again just showing that sheer class he's got, and the experience as well, the fact that he brings that to the side. And like I've said already, you know, I could talk all day about the importance of the clean sheet for us, but, you know, Gaeta was quite crucial to that because of the saves and the contributions he made to keep it at 0-0 in that first half. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is Aaron Wan-Bissaka at right back, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, to be honest, before I go on to talk about his performance, I might as well talk about the international break, because he was meant to play for the England under-21s. Obviously, their first game, I think, was against Germany, wasn't in the squad there, and there were a few other England players who weren't in there, and because of the injuries to the first team, it was sort of rumoured maybe people like Tammy Abraham as well as Wan-Bissaka might be going up and be promoted, you know, to the first team, which was understandable. You think, okay, you missed the game against Germany with the under-21s, so that if they have injuries, you can move up to the first team. So that was all fine. But then the next game, or you know, all of these players who were rumoured to be going up, they all withdrawn from the squad with injuries. So of course he got injured. It was probably sort of a continuation of his injury he had before the international break. But of course he came back to Palace, and he only trained on Friday, so actually it was quite touch and go as to whether he'd start the game, I suppose, let alone even be in the squad. You know, the fact that he's just come back from an injury, but the fact that he had just come back from an injury, had only trained for 1 day, then comes in and puts in such a good performance, you know, you've got to give him credit, because it just shows the sheer talent, and I don't want to say experience, because normally, because he's obviously very young, but he plays like an experienced player, where they come back from an injury, but they don't let that distract them, and they just get on with the job. And I suppose, even though he's inexperienced because of his age, he's experienced in the fact that he's able to come back into the team, having missed a few games, and just do a shift for the side. So for me, you know, the fact that he picked up this injury with the under-21s, which probably was a continuation of his other one, the fact that he came straight back into the side, even though he only trained on Friday, was of course really impressive. Now, like I said already, you know, he's continuing his brilliant run in the side, and you know, almost every week now I find myself repeating myself because his performances are so consistent and so consistently at a high level that is really great to see. Now, the one thing in particular, obviously I could talk all day about his defensive work, and you know, ultimately I do that every week because that's the thing that's really impressive about his performance. But the thing that I really liked about this game here was not necessarily just his sliding challenges, it's just how effectively he used his pace. So especially in that first half where Huddersfield were getting down the flanks, having a few chances, and obviously putting us under a little bit of pressure. You know, Wan-Bissaka was there to deal with it, not necessarily just making these fantastic sliding challenges, but actually using his pace to get in behind or get behind the defender, get them on the right side, and then make the challenge. And that was the thing that was really impressive for me. You know, not the fact that he was making these challenges, just the sheer facts and how, or I suppose, how efficiently he got back and actually dealt with the danger. Now, alongside that, you know, he may not be one of the tallest players on the field, but he won a number of aerial duels. Not sure off the top of my head what the exact number is, but, you know, nevertheless, the fact that you're making challenges, you know, in terms of your sliding challenges, as well as, you know, even though you're not one of the tallest players, winning these aerial duels was, of course, another thing really impressive for me. Now, I'm sure you've seen a video going around Twitter, and that was, of course, you know, a little bit of a move that Wan-Bissaka did in that second half, which really was really impressive. And it wasn't just because of how well he defended the situation, it's just that calmness he showed, and that was obviously where he won the ball back. So Huddersfield are in our Palace box. Obviously I think it was Dan and Tompkins were right beside the Huddersfield player. Wan-Bissaka takes the ball off the defender, runs across the face of goal, going to the left hand side, so obviously Van Aanholt's territory. Obviously he's been chased by a Huddersfield player, literally teases him or sort of skills him, so he looks like he's going to go one way, absolutely fools him, runs the other way, and then makes a clearance. And you know, the fact that he was able to win the ball in the first place was, of course, really impressive. The fact that he ran across the pitch to the other corner flag to obviously drag the defender, or to drag the defender, the attacker there, and then obviously turn him back so that he's facing the wrong way, then make that clearance up the pitch, was of course really impressive. And it just goes to show how unreal he is, because that sort of situation you might be worrying, thinking, or maybe, you know, you make a wrong move and, you know, the attacker's going to be through on goal, and, you know, you're going to be at fault for that. But the sheer fact that he won the ball back, then he obviously got into a position where he could get away from the attacker, then he was able to make the clearance all the way up the field. And I must say, you know, that was a good clearance as well, because I don't believe anyone got on the end of it. So the fact that he done these three things so good really just goes to show I keep saying the experience he's got, because he's only played whatever it is, like for probably about 40 games for Palace, maybe a little bit more, but the way he plays just shows his experience. So the fact that he's able to be calm, he's able to, you know, deal with things like this when he's under pressure, and that just goes to show once again a real highlight the quality he brings to the side. But overall, I've given him an 8 because I was once again just I suppose I'm just lost for words, because his performances have been so good this season. But I've given him an 8 overall because the fact that he was touch and go for this game, only trained on Friday, then just comes into the side and performs to this standard is, of course, the first thing that's really impressive. But the fact that the thing for me is not just sliding challenges, but the fact that he was using his pace to get in behind, get the ball off the attackers, was the thing that really did impress me. And the fact that he combined that with that sort of calmness personified move by getting the ball back, dragging it to the corner flag, then clearing his lines, as well as the aerial duels as well, was something that really was impressive for me. So once again, the right back, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I do think the 8 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the first centre-back in our back four, and that is James Tompkins, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, before I go on to talk about his performance, I might as well briefly mention the stat which I did earlier on, and that's the fact that this was our 10th clean sheet of the season. Now, obviously this is quite significant when you consider, you know, in terms of comparing it to other teams in the league. We're now level with Tottenham in terms of clean sheets, and we're now ranked 4th, or joint 4th, in the league for clean sheets, which once again just goes to show the sheer sort of talent we've got in defence. And whilst we've obviously lost Milivojevic, obviously through injury a few months back, you know, the fact that our team was able to go through and get a clean sheet against Huddersfield, albeit we arguably should be beating bottom of the league theoretically, but nevertheless, the fact that we put in a performance, got yet another clean sheet, was of course great to see. And I'm not sure what Palace's record is for clean sheets in the season, but surely this has got to be up there in terms of just how solid we've been at the back. And you know, like I've said, even though we've been missing Wan-Bissaka, and the fact that James Tompkins hasn't necessarily been great, especially sort of in the Brighton and Watford games, the fact that he came back here, I put in a very good performance, and I've given him a 7, really just highlights the fact that he's maybe finally sort of adjusting to not being with Sacco at the back. But like I've said, 10th clean sheet of the season, that is a real achievement for a team that's in the bottom half of the table. And if you're looking at our goal difference, I think it's -2 now, which just goes to show once again that quality we've got in defence. We just need to be a little bit more consistent with it. But in terms of James Tomkins, across the whole season, been very crucial for us at the back. But obviously this game here, he was also very crucial, hence why I've given him the 7. Now, in terms of the threat that Huddersfield had, obviously, we know that they haven't scored many goals this season, so they're not necessarily going to be much of a threat when you consider, their games recently. But their last game against West Ham, they scored 3 goals, even though they lost 4-3. So they've got goals in the side. So the fact that James Tomkins dealt with that threat relatively well, making a number of tackles, and of course, winning aerial duels as well was, of course, impressive for me. But the thing that really did impress me, and this is something we've missed since Milivojevic come out of the side, and that's just the ability for us to play out from the back. And we've seen with Kelly, with Dan, they're not necessarily got that skill on the ball that, let's say, Sako has. And in the absence of Sako, obviously Tomkins hasn't necessarily stepped up because in games recently he's been a bit lacklustre, but this game here he done exactly that. 87% of his passes were successful, which just goes to show how good he was in terms of getting the ball forward. And arguably not all of these passes would be going forward. Some of them might be back to the goalkeeper, some of them might be to his fellow defenders, but the fact that he had such a high pass success rate just goes to show that actually, in terms of actually playing with the ball out the back, trying to build up attacks rather than just lumping the ball long, that was something that quite evidently was good in this match. Now, there was one moment in particular which wasn't down to his defender, but something which really did impress me, and that was a volley from about 25 yards out. Now, if this has gone in, obviously he's not up there with Townsend's goal, because that's obviously already 1 goal of the season, but it would have been up there, in terms of the nominations, because it was a fantastic left-footed pegged volley from about 25 yards out, which was absolutely outrageous. And to be honest, and when you consider it was from his left foot, but he's a right-footed centre-back, just goes to show the sheer quality he had. And if it wasn't for the goalkeeper making a save, it would have gone in. So yes, it wouldn't have been up there with Townsend's goal, but it certainly would have been in the running for the nominations just because of the quality he's got. And once again, Tomkins showing that not only is he an asset to the side in terms of his defensive work, but actually going forward, albeit you're not going to see him do it every game. If the ball drops to him on the edge of the area, he can hit them, or from corners he can head them in. So he's got this quality in terms of the goal scoring chances he creates. Now, obviously, if you look back at that chance in particular, it all came from a Palace corner. Obviously, the corner came in, it got dealt with by the goalkeeper, then Townsend had a shot, that was dealt, or I think he had a header, that was dealt with, and of course the ball eventually fell out to Tomkins. So, yes, our corners haven't been great this season, but the fact that there were just numerous chances inside the box, and the final thing to happen in that phase of play was Tomkins to hit it and force the goalkeeper into a save, just goes to show that actually maybe we are sort of turning the corner as such in terms of what we can do from set pieces. But overall, aside from that, and aside from the fact that just overall in the game he done a really great job to keep a clean sheet, by dealing with Huddersfield's threat, there isn't really much more to say about Tomkins' performance. And I do think a 7 overall is a fair reflection, when you consider he done his bit to keep a clean sheet. He was making tackles, making blocks, very good at passing the ball out from the back, obviously with that high pass success rate, and the fact that he even had a go and he got it on target and it almost went in. For that alone, he obviously does deserve the 7. So James Tomkins here playing in the back for a 7 for him. So I'm now going to move on to his centre back partner, and that is Scott Dan, who I'm going to give a 5 overall. Now, of course, Dan has been one of these players who, in terms of since Saka's been injured, we've been debating as to whether Dan should start games, whether Kelly should start games, and rightly so. I do think Dan's come in and, he's replaced Kelly last sort of few games or so, and he's done alright, so I think it was rightly deserved that he kept his place in the side. But I've given him a 5 here against Huddersfield just because he was a bit lacking in terms of his play, and in terms of the stand we've seen from him in previous seasons. Yes, I know he's had his injuries, but he could have done a lot better in terms of his performance here. Now, one of the reasons I was disappointed with, it wasn't because he wasn't doing what Tomkins was doing in terms of making blocks and challenges, because occasionally he was doing that. It's just a sheer fact that maybe it was just his lack of pace, but numerous times he got caught out of possession, found himself, having to chase back because, Huddersfield players have managed to get beyond him on the counter-attack, and that was the thing that was really disappointing for me, because yes, he may not have the most pace now, and of course that injury to his knee may have taken its toll, but you would still expect him to get close to a defender or not allow them to get past you so quickly, as opposed to trying to keep up with them and you just let them get past you so easily. So that was something which I think was quite lacking about his performance. But much like Tomkins, he was still doing some things right, winning tackles, winning aerial duels. But the thing for me is that, yes, you can do that, but you also need to do the other work in terms of, in sort of the outplay, you need to make sure that you're tracking back to stop the attackers of the opposition, as well as making sure you're positioned in the right place, because there are loads of slow defenders in football, but they obviously make up for that in terms of their maybe game awareness, let's call it that. So maybe that's something that Dan arguably should have done better in this game, because if he had just been a little bit more careful in terms of marking players more closely, or not going too far forward to make up for that yard of pace that the attacker may have above him, the little things like that could have obviously improved his performance overall. But the main reason for me, I've given him a 5, is just because the game highlighted, yes, we know Scott Dan's a good defender, as we've seen in some of the games he's played, the last few weeks or so, and of course, beyond that, you're looking at last few seasons or so. But I've given him a 5 just because this game really highlighted, how lacklustre he is, and the fact that his injuries are finally taking their toll. And it's just, like I said, he won a few tackles, won aerial duels, but the fact that he was a little bit slow, not necessarily that good at playing the ball at his feet, and obviously the number of times he kept lumping balls forward and then not going anywhere was another thing that was really frustrating. So for me, it was sort of a summary, a real sort of mixture of things why I was quite disappointed with his performance. And I suppose going back to lumping the ball forward, there was one occasion in particular where Townsend had got through down the right hand side, pinged a long ball forward, but it was too far ahead of him. Another chance where he's pinged the ball about 30, 40 yards, but it's too far in front of the attackers. So there are little few chances here where, rather than him trying to just play the ball out from the back like Tompkins was doing, trying to sort of build up the play slowly rather than just lumping the ball forward, if he had done that differently, then maybe something else different would have come out of his performance. But overall, Scott Dan here, a little bit of a disappointing performance from him, because he was sort of lacking in comparison to the standards we've set from him. Could have done a lot better, and that was for me mainly down to him being slow and not necessarily keeping up with the attackers. And whilst it didn't cost us because we got a clean sheet on another day, if Huddersfield had finished a few of their chances, then maybe it could have overall. But overall, I do think the injuries are finally taking their toll. But for me personally, he's probably going to start against Tottenham midweek, so he really needs to up his game there, because of course we know Tottenham are considerably better than Huddersfield, so obviously he needs to up his game there. Otherwise, someone like Kelly needs to come in, because of course we were lacking in this game here. But once again, Scott down here, going to give him a 5, a slightly disappointing performance from him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our defence, and that is the left back Patrick Van Aanholt, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. And obviously Van Aanholt's been one of these players who's been a hot topic over the last sort of few weeks or so, and that's just because he hasn't necessarily been up to the standard he set last season. And actually it was nice to see him actually change that here, with, even though his defensive performance was still not the best, the fact that he finally got back on the score sheet was of course a great thing to see. Now obviously I've talked quite a lot this season in the fact that, when we've got ahead, we haven't got that second goal to kill the game off, or we've just let the opposition get back into the game so easily. And it was nice to see here that wasn't the case here against Huddersfield, because we got our first goal, and right towards the end of the game we got that second goal to seal the win and obviously kill the game dead. So it was nice to see Van Aanholt get on the score sheet in terms of the importance of it, in terms of sealing that win for us. And the thing for me is actually the quality of the goal as well, because I'm going to talk a little bit later on about Zaha and his involvement in that. But in terms of Van Aanholt, the fact that he was able to make that run from fullback, get in the right position, run onto the ball, and obviously time his run perfectly, so when he hit it right footed, he can obviously get it under the goalkeeper into the far corner, was of course good to see. So whilst the importance of the goal was obviously important, obviously using the same word sort of twice, but obviously that was important in terms of getting that goal to seal the win, but also the quality of the goal was nice to see as well. And like I've said, he's been a player who's been a bit hot and cold this season. Certainly, I think the last goal he scored was against Bournemouth, which just goes to show, he hasn't scored in a while. So it was nice to see him finally get back onto the score sheet. And, whilst he weren't back to his best defensively, it was nice to see him actually going forward and actually having that contribution in that advanced positions, which is something he's been missing recently. But I suppose in terms of looking at the performance overall, I've given him a 7 because he got the goal for us, and it was a step in the right direction, because whilst he wasn't completely back to his best, there were glimpses in his play of him doing what he's done previously. Certainly the end of last season, where he was arguably one of our better players. Obviously nice to see him going in that direction. Now obviously, aside from the goal he scored, and aside from the fact that his defensive work was alright, didn't do anything great, didn't do anything that bad, so I think on that part that was fine. I do think the main thing for me that impressed me, hence why I've given him 7, is just the sheer amount of good runs he made going forward. And I've said already, that's something that's been lacking this season, but it was nice to actually see now that he took it upon himself to make up for that by making these runs forward. And it wasn't just the fact that he was making the runs, it's the fact that how well he was linking up with Zaha. So previously, as we've seen this season, he's been a bit cautious to go slightly further forward, and he was doing an alright job defensively, but he's just sort of hanging around there and not actually getting that far up the pitch. But this game here was a complete different scenario where he was doing his defensive work and looking to get as far forward as he could, as every chance he had. And of course, he was using his pace to get the better of defenders, do lovely 1-2s with Wilf. And there was one in particular where, Wilf and Van Aanholt were flicking the ball to each other. Then we got a transfer on goal, which of course Batshuayi didn't finish. So you're looking at a number of chances where we were going forward, we were creating chances, and obviously we weren't able to finish them. But, you look back at stuff I've been saying earlier on in the season, I'd be going, if Van Aanholt had just made a few runs going forward, we would have had more chances to score or to get ahead in the game. So it was nice to see him actually take it upon himself to actually provide us with that option sort of on the overlap down at left hand side. And like I've said, whilst he could have done a little bit slightly better defensively, especially in the first half, where as a team I don't think we were quite up to standard, aside from that I do think in the second half he improved drastically. And of course, it was nice to see him actually get a goal, because he's been through a little bit of a run of form where he hasn't been that great. So it was nice for him to finally get that goal, which of course hopefully will set him up for a good end to the season. We've got like 7 games left. Hopefully with games coming up, him getting into advanced positions, even if he doesn't score another goal till the end, through to the end of the season, it'd be nice to see him actually continue to get into these advanced positions, so of course he can create chances for others. But once again, Patrick Van Aanholt here, the left back, good performance from him. Obviously got the second goal to seal the win for Palace, was a step in the right direction in terms of improving his performances from recent games. So once again, I do think these 7 overall is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our midfield, and that is our captain Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now in terms of his performance here, it was a game sort of, I suppose, a Jekyll and Hyde performance, where the good part of his game was the fact that he, once again got another penalty, converted it from the spot really relatively well. And of course the downside to his performance is just the fact that his general play in the midfield was quite poor. So I do think the 6 overall is a fair result when you consider, like I've said, that Jekyll and Hyde, where some parts of his game were good, other parts of it weren't so quite good. But in terms of, going back to the goal he scored, obviously it's a penalty and he sent the goalkeeper the wrong way. But the fact that he put the power on it sent the goalkeeper the wrong way. And obviously the celebrations as well, you can see what it meant to him. That was of course all great to see. And he has got a really impressive record from set pieces from the spot. You're looking at it, and I think it's this season, or if you're looking at how many goals or penalties he scored this season, I think he's now matched Steven Gerrard's record from about 2004, 2005 or 5-6 season. So the fact that he's up there in terms of, the amount of penalties he's scored in a season, obviously people could say, oh, you win loads of penalties and you're likely to score them. But the fact that he's able to do it so consistently, score them, all different types of penalties, into the top corner, rolling it in, down the middle. The fact that he's able to do that, and like he did here, put the goalkeeper the wrong way, was of course really quite impressive. And people could say, oh, you win loads of penalties, but even if when you win a penalty you still have to score it. So the fact that he scored it, and he's up there with people like Steven Gerrard in terms of just the sheer amounts of penalties scored, is of course great to see. Now if you're looking at the goals he scored for Palace, this is his 10th goal of the season, which for a central a defensive midfielder, and even though he takes our penalties anyway, that's obviously quite good. And I think it's either 22 or 23 in his whole Palace career, which just goes to show the sheer amount of penalties he's got, but also just the goal contributions he offers to the side, because without his goals we'd be in a really bad situation right now. So it just goes to show how crucial he is to us in that respect. And I think obviously before Zaha overtook the record, I think it was Armstrong, was 23 goals. So the fact that Luka's almost at that milestone, always at that mark, and almost certainly will go above it, whether that be this season or next season, just goes to show how good he is for us, in the fact that within 3 seasons, or 2.5, he's almost able to have overtaken what was once our top Premier League goal scorer. So that was obviously all the good side about his performance, the fact that he scored a penalty, put the goalkeeper the wrong way. That was all great to see. But obviously the negative side of that is just the fact that his overall play in the midfield was quite poor, and the main reason for that wasn't just because he was given the ball. I suppose it was mainly down to him giving the ball away. It wasn't necessarily down to him not making challenges, or not getting involved in the midfield in terms of breaking play down, driving forward. It was just mainly the fact that he just kept giving the ball away, and he didn't actually seem capable of dictating the play. So what you want from a deep, I suppose you could call him a deep line playmaker, because that's what he does. He wins loads of challenges, looks to get the ball forward, and he's done that numerous times this season. But the thing that was poor in this game is the fact that he was given the ball away, and then the few times he didn't give the ball away, he wasn't capable of actually dictating the play by actually creating something from that. So whether that be pinging the ball forward, whether that be driving forward, he wasn't quite, giving that all in his game. So like I've said, the good side of his performance is the fact that he scored yet another penalty. The downside is the fact that he was quite poor in terms of his midfield performance, and I suppose the fact that he got us the goal, which got us ahead in the game, was sort of paper over the cracks, I suppose, in terms of his performance. And you look at someone like Kiyate, when he came off the bench, he allowed us to drive forward and was always looking to get forward, and obviously that's something that Luka was obviously missing and lacking throughout the rest of the game here. But for the captain here, once again, nice to see him get another goal. But in terms of his defensive performance and general midfield play, needs to improve that, because the game against Tottenham's obviously going to be no easy feat. So we need to make sure that we're solid, obviously in defence, but also having that protection in front of the back four, which of course was something that Luka was lacking in this game here. But overall, I do think a 6 for the captain is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to a player who's come up for quite a lot of debate recently, and certainly I've put my view across on that, and that is of course Max Meyer, who I'm going to give a 5 overall. Now, realistically, obviously I've praised Max Meyer quite a lot this season, saying he needs to be given a chance, and a few chances he's had off the bench and a few games he's started, albeit some of the games he's started he's been bad, the majority of them have been quite good. And you want to look at games like Doncaster games, even some of the games at home where he's come off the bench, he's been very effective for us. So I've obviously advocated for him, saying he needs to start games, he needs to be given a chance, and he got a chance here to start the game here, which of course most people were quite surprised to, because of course Roy always likes to start with James McArthur, but he started with Max Meyer in place of him, and actually he was quite poor in the game. He'd finally been given a chance to start a game, and he was quite poor. And he got subbed off at half time, which I do think it was nice to see. I've talked recently about the fact that Roy Hodgson was always reacts to things rather than being proactive, so it was nice to see him actually be proactive here, see that something clearly is not working in his formation, the way the team's set out, and made that change and brought McArthur on, and certainly McArthur made a difference to the side. Now I suppose I've given him a 5 overall because his overall performance was quite poor, but in the first half there were a few good moments of play that he did, in terms of winning the ball back and driving forward, but other than that there wasn't really much else to talk about in his performance, and that's why it was disappointing. And I suppose it's whether because he was playing out of position, the fact that we were playing a 4-3-3 but he was playing a little bit further wide than he would have liked to. He likes to play a number 10 role, or whether it's just the fact that he wasn't really up for it, or he wasn't really, I suppose he was just in bad run of form. Whatever it was, he wasn't quite playing to the standard that we've seen him play recently. And whether that be, like I said, whether that be the formation with him playing a position which isn't really suited for him because he prefers to play more central and slightly further up the pitch, or whether it's just the fact that it was a bad day at the office, of course it was disappointing overall. Now, like I said already, I've given him 5 because of just how poor he was and the fact that he got substituted at half time. And for any player getting subbed off at half time, if it's not for an injury, is obviously not a good thing. And I suppose the really disappointing thing is, it's not just his performance, it's just the fact that he had a chance to showcase what he could do, but he didn't. And like I've said, I've given him lots of praise this season, saying he needs to be given a chance. I've talked about him quite a lot, saying when he came off the bench he was making such an impact, he was helping us to drive forward, he gave us that creativity that we've been missing, and certainly that's been a case in recent games. But obviously it wasn't so here, where he started the game but wasn't quite able to replicate his performances off the bench. What this will mean for the games going forward, I don't know. Maybe for the Tottenham game, Roy Hodgson might revert back to playing James McArthur, just to give him something he knows in midfield, a little bit more, I suppose, skill and a little bit more tenacity in that side, just to sort of help us contain Tottenham, let's say. But nevertheless, I do think a slightly disappointing performance from Max Meyer, hence why I've given him a 5. But hopefully he can improve in the games coming up, because as we've seen in certain games, he's got real talent, we just haven't seen it when he necessarily has started games. So once again, Max Meyer here, slightly disappointing performance from him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our midfield, and that is of course Jeffrey Slupp, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, obviously, Jeffrey Slupp's been a player, once again, who's come up for quite a lot of debate recently, and that's just because he's been on a great run of form, certainly sort of from December time up until sort of, I suppose, February, where he obviously got the Player of the Month award. Now, in comparison to his games recently, where of course he cemented his side in the midfield. I think this was a very average game from him, and that's just because he wasn't really getting involved as much as he has been recently, wasn't looking to drive forward as much as he would have liked, wasn't necessarily looking to get into some shooting opportunities, which of course has been sort of why his success and why he's had an upturn in form this season, and that was obviously missing from his game here. Now, the reason I've given him a 6 as opposed to Maya, who I've obviously given a 5, is just because there were little bits and pieces of his play which was quite good, and you know, a number of times he actually drove forward, albeit with no sort of end product on the end of that, but he just didn't seem to sort of continue his recent form. And I suppose it could be a similar thing with Maya, where maybe they're just, you know, having an off game, and maybe it's because Huddersfield was slightly better in that first half. Whatever it was, they weren't quite up to it, and I suppose Jeffrey Schlupp was one of these players. And you know, I do think, you know, like I've said, recently he's been fantastic for us and rightly deserves his place in the side. And I suppose I've said this earlier on in the season, you know, if a player's going to have an off game, I'd rather them be average in their performance rather than being absolutely terrible. So I suppose in Jeffrey Schlupp's case, yes, he was pretty average in the game, but at least he just gave sort of a constant level of performance throughout the whole game. But like I said already, going to give him a 6 because it was just a very average game in comparison to games recently. But, you know, unlike Maya, who of course I gave a 5, I've given him a 6 because he drove forward a few times, done little bits and pieces of play, which was quite impressive. But the fact that he couldn't maintain that or couldn't sort of take it up a notch throughout the rest of the game was, of course, a thing that was slightly disappointing. So for me, Jeffrey Schlupp here, playing in midfield, I'm going to give him a 6 overall. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our front three, and that is, of course, Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 5 overall. Now, yet again, a player here who, since sort of December time, has been on a great run of form. Obviously, I don't want to keep going back to that City goal, but that seems to have been something which people have been saying Townsend's in a great run of form because he scored that goal. But he seems to be rubbing off a little bit now, and he seems to be getting back to his old self, where he's having good little bits of play here and there, but then other times, you know, he takes shots and they don't really go on target. He misses the target with a few of his shots. So obviously he seems to be a little bit sort of that goal and that sort of momentum he had from the back of that seems to be wearing off. And obviously the fact that I've given him a 5 really just highlights the fact that this was sort of a performance where it was quite under par by his standards, but much like people like Jeffrey Schlupp and Max Meyer, maybe it was just an off day, but you know, like I said already, a bit of a disappointing performance from Townsend's perspective. Now, the main thing for me that was the disappointment is just the fact that he was quite wasteful in front of goal. And you know, I've talked already the fact that he was wasteful and the fact that whenever he cuts inside, he puts the ball wide, and that's fine because you want to try your luck from, let's say, 25 yards, and sometimes it will go in, sometimes it will go completely wide, and that's absolutely fine, even though you're wasting a chance. But when you've got the chances he had, you know, you're literally going through on goal, the goal's literally in front of you, and it's probably easier to score than to miss. And then you miss is obviously the thing that was quite wasteful, because I'd much rather him actually balloon balls out of the stadium as opposed to get such a clear-cut chance, which is probably the easiest chance you're ever going to get to score, and you still manage to somehow put it wide. And whether that's because the way he was running onto the ball made it obviously a difficult ball to deal with, whether it's just the fact that he's obviously not quite used to actually running through on goal and having to put a ball across the goalkeeper, whatever it is, he obviously was quite wasteful in this game in comparison to obviously earlier on in the season, and much like Max Meyer, he was rightly subbed in the game. Now, obviously, the two chances I want to talk about, they were in the second half, and like I've said, they were easier to score, and he still missed them. Obviously, one of them, I think he was put through by Wilf, going through on goal, missed that one, and then another one where, of course, he put it wide as well. So two chances here, which could have, even though it didn't cost us, because we still won the game 2-0, these are chances that if we had just been a little bit more clinical, if he just, repositioned his foot or run onto the ball slightly differently, maybe could have scored these goals, and maybe we could have won the game maybe 3 or 4-0. But overall, I do think technically he was alright in terms of, getting the ball forward, having a few good touches here and there. But the fact that he didn't quite have that pace to make a real impact against Huddersfield back four, because there was one time in particular where he did show a little bit of pace, where there was a long cross-field pass. He got the ball on the right hand side and made a run. Nothing did come off of it, but the fact that he made the run and got into the box was good. But aside from that, it just looked like he was lacking a little bit of pace, wasn't looking to run at them as much as we would have liked him to. And that's the thing with Townsend, because we know he's got the ability to get to the byline, put crosses in, but we didn't quite see that enough in this game here. And in terms of challenging the back four of the opposition, that was something that he was lacking in his game overall. But like I said already, I'm going to give him a 5 overall, and I suppose much like Max Meyer, much like Jeffrey Schlupp, maybe it's just a performance where he was having an off day, or whether it's just the fact that his sort of momentum from that goal has worn off. Whatever it was a slightly under par performance from him. And obviously coming up against his old team Tottenham on the Wednesday evening. Hopefully he can turn up for that game and, you know, maybe spoil the party at the new stadium. But overall, a little bit of a disappointing performance from Townsend, where he was quite wasteful and rightly subbed towards the end of the game. And whilst he was okay technically, you know, the fact that he missed these real gilt-edged chances was of course the disappointing thing for me. So now I'm going to move on to the striker in the team, and that is Michy Batshuayi, who I'm going to give a 5 overall. Now, much like what I said with people like Townsend and Max Meyer, it was a performance where, considering Batshuayi's standards he set since joining Palace, it was a little bit under par and a little bit disappointing in the fact that he's a player who, you know, certainly in that first half could have done a lot better for us in the game. Now, obviously we know, I've talked already, the first half overall as a team performance was very disappointing, but there are a few chances, you know, that Batshuayi could have done a little bit better with, which could have upped his performance. And I suppose the reason he was the reason I've given him a 5 and the reason he was a little bit disappointing is just because of the lack of chances he had, or the fact that he didn't seem to be as clinical as he had done previously. And it wasn't the fact that he wasn't trying to do stuff in the game, it's just the fact that maybe it was just an off day and it weren't necessarily coming off for him. Now, the thing that was really did annoy me, and this is one of the reasons why I've given him a 5, it's just the sheer amount of times he found himself in offside positions. Now, I can understand maybe 1 or 2 times you've missed time to a run, but maybe I think it was 3 or 4, maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 5 times he was caught offside in positions where if he had just stopped his run like 1 or 2 seconds and just ran into the ball slightly later, then he probably could have had more chances. He would have been able to get on the ball a little bit more without being flagged offside, and that was the thing that was really disappointing for my performance, or from his performance. It's not just the fact that he maybe missed a few chances and could have done a lot better overall in terms of his forward play, just the sheer fact that he found himself offside so many times that if he had just timed his run slightly differently, slightly later, then maybe 3 or 4 other chances he could have had to go through on goal when he scored. And, you know, obviously I can understand, you know, people like Zaha occasionally get caught offside 1 or 2 times, but just the fact that he just got found offside a lot throughout the game was of course really disappointing. And like I've said, you know, I've given him a 5 because his overall performance was disappointing, but if he had just timed his runs slightly better, he would have had so many more chances if he had just timed them right, and maybe he could have either scored from them, created for his teammates, or just upped his sort of performance levels and how, you know, how people sort of perceived his performance overall. Now, there was one in particular where I think he was quite selfish. You know, we know he can score and we know we've seen how good his finishes have been for Palace, but there was one time in particular where he should have passed Townsend in that first half, but instead he went for goal himself. And of course by that time, you know, even though it was good defending by Huddersfield, you know, getting players back, making them blocks, it was a little bit disappointing in the fact that if he had just made that simple pass a few seconds earlier to Townsend, there was no players around him and he probably could have been able to score at the near post. So that was just one chance in particular where the ball's come to Batshuayi inside the box. He's tried to sort of mess around, taking a few touches inside the box to have a shot himself, but the time he's had a shot, the defenders there made a sliding challenge and the ball sort of gone out to the right hand side, and obviously we've had to rebuild again. So that one chance in particular really sort of epitomised his performance overall, because that was sort of the theme of his game, where he was having a few chances but he wasn't able to finish them off, or his decision making was a little bit off. And that's overall how I really can sum up his performance, because I've given him a 5 mainly because of the fact that he kept being caught offside, but also due to the fact that it wasn't necessarily a lack of trying. It was just the fact that he probably could have done a lot better. And, you know, you look at that chance in particular in the first half, if he had just made that decision to, rather than try and dribble and try and shoot, just pass the ball to Townsend, and it was far easier for him to score, then maybe the game could have been different. And yes, it didn't matter anyway because we still won 2-0, but in that first half, make it 1-0 midway through it, and it could have been a different story overall. So Michy Batshuayi here on loan from Chelsea, going to give him a 5 overall. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our starting 11, and that is the winger / striker, because he obviously changed position in that second half, and that is Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, much like Townsend, even though I've given him a 7, much like Townsend, Zaha did squander a number of opportunities throughout the game, and much like, I suppose, Batshuayi, you know, in the fact that he had a few chances and yes, he squandered them, but it didn't really hurt us. I suppose you could say the same for Wilf, in the fact that there were a few gilt-edged chances that he missed, and certainly the fact that I gave Townsend quite a lot of stick for, you know, you expect better from Zaha as well. But then on the other hand, we still went on to win the game, so it doesn't really matter. And I suppose Zaha in particular, the reason I've given him a 7 is actually, yes, he missed a few chances himself, but in terms of winning us a penalty and the fact that he also got the assist for Van Aanholt's goal, sort of made up for that, the fact that he missed these chances earlier on in the game. Now, in the first half, you know, his the main thing I was impressed with is not actually his offensive work, it was actually his defensive work. So the fact that quite a lot of the time he found himself in a left back position because he was tracking back and he was helping Van Aanholt out by just giving that little bit of extra protection when Huddersfield were putting on the pressure was of course really great to see. And once we changed the formation to a 4-4-2, as I mentioned earlier, it seemed to bring him out, bring him to life, I suppose, and make him a real threat again. Because rather than him being out wide, and yes, he can still go forward and run to the byline, but he obviously had to go back and defend. Changed to a 4-4-2, he was playing up top, and that just allowed him to concentrate a little bit more on his attacking play. And it certainly made a difference because his second half performance was fantastic in terms of running at the fullbacks, looking to get him behind, using his pace to try and create chances for his teammates and himself. That was of course great to see. And like I've said, first half a little bit disappointing in terms of his offensive play, but his defensive play, even though you wouldn't expect him to do that, the sheer contribution he made defensively was of course really impressive. But for me, the reason I've given him a 7 is just because of how well he came to life in the second half. The fact that he's a class act, in the fact that he just done a shift, very professional performance where may not necessarily have got his way in the first half, but in the second half he did. And great skill to win the penalty in the first place, and the fact that he's going to take a shot, gets fouled, and rightly is a penalty, from Huddersfield defender. So that's all fine. And of course, he probably should have scored when he was on one-on-one, but like I've said, he made up for that miss, which was arguably probably easier to score than miss. He made up for that in the fact that he won the penalty, but then right towards the end of the game drove forward and obviously done a no-look pass to Van Aanholt, and of course Van Aanholt went through and scored to make it 2-0. So whilst his first half was a little bit disappointing, and obviously he squandered a few chances here and there, the fact that he made up for that by coming alive in that second half, doing the defensive work in that first half, as well as just having the great skill to win the penalty, and of course that ability to actually time his pass perfectly for Van Aanholt, who was running onto it, was of course great to see as well. So Wilfried Zaha here, playing initially as a left winger, and of course sort of in the second half play to a striker. Going to give him a 7 overall, because even though he missed a great chance to actually score for himself in the game, the fact that he was involved in the 2 goals we scored was of course impressive overall. So now I'm going to move on to the 3 subs we made in the game, and they obviously were James McArthur, Christian Benteke and Cheikhou Kouyaté. Now to be honest, I'm not going to give a rating to Kouyaté, mainly because I can't really remember him actually doing much in the game, and that's just because he came on so late in the game. And in terms of his performances, he came on the pitch, made a slight difference, helped us to see the game out. And I've seen someone say this on Twitter, and I have to agree, they can't actually remember Kouyaté actually having a negative game for us, a bad game for us, and it just goes to show how much of a proper sort of good signing he has been for us. So whilst I've given him no rating here because he wasn't really on the pitch long enough, and even though he had a positive impact here and there, can't really give him a rating because he was on the pitch for such a short amount of time. But like I've said, and like other people have said on Twitter, we can't really remember him having a negative impact on a game, or having a negative game overall, which just goes to show how much of a quality signing he is for us. Now in terms of the 2 other substitutes that came on, obviously James McArthur and Christian Benteke, going to give them both 6s overall, because I think they both came on, they done what they had to do in terms of, obviously McArthur was all about, getting us back, getting us to sort of get that goal in the game, gave us a little bit more impetus in midfield, and of course Benteke was on just to give us that threat up top, just to help us see out the game. And I think both of them done these jobs respectively really well. Now obviously James McArthur, like I've said, he was brought on just to bring a little bit more solidity to the midfield, help us to get a greater control, something which we'd been missing in that first half, and just really helped our overall performance significantly. So obviously I talked already about Max Meyer being a little bit under par, but James McArthur coming on just gave us a little bit more impetus, helped us to actually drive forward a little bit better. Once again, something that Max Meyer was a little bit disappointing at. And in terms of that ability to go forward, obviously I talked about Kouyaté doing it, but McArthur in particular was always looking to go forward, looking to get involved. And whilst he wasn't involved in the fact that he had many chances for himself, the fact that he had that intent to go forward as well was a thing that was really quite impressive. Now Christian Benteke, I've given him a 6 as well. Obviously he came on and made the difference just because of that aerial presence he brought to the side, the fact that he gave us a target in our attack, and just the fact that he was winning balls all over the place, looking to get involved. So that was all good in terms of his play. And there was one ball in particular where he obviously got the ball around the corner, put Wilf through on goal, and that was a sublime pass, and of course Wilf wasn't able to finish it. But that in particular, once again, just shows the quality that Benteke's got. Yes, he hasn't scored in ages, but in terms of his build-up play and his ability to, hold the ball down and get up and, bring other players into play was, of course, good to see. So I do think both McArthur and Benteke do deserve 6s. They came on, the pitch. Obviously MacArthur to bring that solidity and Benteke to give us that target and help us to see the game out, and they both done their jobs very effectively. And of course Cheku Kouyaté, as I've already said, can't give him a rating overall because I personally feel he wasn't on the pitch for long enough. Now obviously normally I'd go on to talk about a little bit of a summary of the game. Actually Liam on Twitter, obviously I can't remember his @ off the top of my head, but he actually put out a really good summary, a few tweets, you know, which really for me, I'm reading through them, and I thought really he sort of knocks the game nail on the head there, really sums up the game really well, and I couldn't really put it better myself. So in terms of just a few negatives about the game, we obviously might as well start with these thoughts. Obviously the first half was quite awful, and that's because Huddersfield done their job to frustrate us. Exactly right, you know, you can't disagree with that. We were by far away from our best, but of course that was obviously one part of it, but in the other half it's just that Huddersfield were doing well to restrict us. They were quite solid at the back. Obviously Scott Down, I've talked about him already, but he is done at Premier League level, sadly. This is sort of one where I'm 50-50 on, because I do think, having seen some of his performances this season, he can still do a shift at Premier League level, but there's certain parts of his game which I have to agree with that are not necessarily, or don't look to be up to the Premier League standard anymore, which is quite sad because he's been a great servant for the club, been a great defender for us. Unfortunate that he got that injury, and I suppose, you know, Liam there's obviously sort of in the minority in the fact that they think he's completely done, but nevertheless I do think certain parts of his play are done at Premier League level. Obviously this is something I talked about with Luka Milivojevic, but he doesn't seem capable of dictating the play. This is something, once again, this is sort of 50-50, because there's been games this season where he's completely run the midfield, you know, pinging balls forward, getting back and defending. So certain games this season he's been great at, but then on the other hand, this game in particular, he didn't really seem capable of dictating the play. You know, he wasn't looking to get the ball forward, he wasn't looking to make challenges everywhere, wasn't looking to get a control or get a grip on the game as much as he would have liked. And obviously the final thing is, and this is something I've talked about already, you know, someone needs to explain the offside rule to Michy Batshuayi. And, you know, 100% we have to agree with that, because if the sort of 4 or 5, even 6 times he was caught offside, if he had just timed his run slightly better and actually, you know, made sure he was onside, he probably could have had more chances in the game and maybe could have scored, because he would have had more chances through on goal. So if someone just explains that to him, or he just sort of reflects on the game and improves on that, that would be great to see. So them 4 things I think are the real negatives from the game, and I have to agree with Liam on the most part there. And in terms of the positives, you know, you're looking at the negative was obviously the first half was awful. The positive, on the other hand, was actually the second half was a drastically improved half. Yes, finishing could have been better, and if we had just finished a few of our chances better, we probably could have won it maybe 3 or 4-0, but nevertheless an improvement in that second half. And obviously this is something which I personally hadn't thought of at the time. I was just thinking, you know, Wan-Bissaka is a great talent, but actually last sort of fullback we had who was as good as Wan-Bissaka, or what we thought was obviously Nathaniel Klein. And the point that Liam's make is actually many people thought they'd never see someone as good as a right back as Nathaniel Klein was, but actually I think we're all wrong now, because Wan-Bissaka was just on a different level. He seems to have overtaken Klein in terms of just the skill, his sheer, I suppose, his defensive ability. Everything about his play seems to be great, and I have to really agree there, because it didn't really occur to me before, because I'm just thinking, you know, Wan-Bissaka is a great talent, but actually so was Nathaniel Klein at the time, but we seem to have forgotten that now just because of the high standard that Wan-Bissaka has obviously set. Obviously the third point here is that Benteke changed the game, and hopefully that's sort of a part, you can play a part in the rest of the season. I 100% have to agree with that, because he came off the bench, he was winning knockdowns, getting others involved in play, and obviously was looking to play the ball to others. So that was of course great to see, and a real positive impact off the bench. And of course the final positive for me is the fact that Tompkins, and you know Liam as well, Tompkins played very well, which is obviously big in Saka's absence. So I've talked already the fact that quite a lot of since Saka's been injured, you know, Tompkins has been a bit subdued, not necessarily at his best. So it's nice to see Tompkins back to his best here, playing really well, even though his normal partner in Saka, of course, wasn't there. So if you do want to find Liam on Twitter, like I said, I can't remember his @, but I'm sure you'll find him on there. But you know, a great analysis there in terms of, you know, splitting up the game in terms of the negatives and the positives. And obviously we've got the big game against Tottenham coming up midweek, obviously their first game in a new stadium, so we're going to have to see what happens there. But if we put in a performance like we did second half, we might have a chance, you know, in terms of if we actually finish our chances off and combine that with a similar second half, we might have chances. But if we play like we did in the first half, Tottenham are going to run riot against us, you know, they're going to, you know, run the channels completely. So what we need to do, obviously I don't know whether Roy Hodgson will do that, but we need to either tighten up in the midfield and make sure that we don't have another first half like we did on Saturday against Huddersfield and just play really well like we did in the second half, but also maybe try someone like Michy Batshuayi and Benteke up top. Obviously we should try and do it at home because we always seem to be lacking goals at home, so it'd be nice to see us do that. But obviously away from home, maybe we should try it as well, because we know the threat that Tottenham has, so if we can just try and counter that with 2 strikers up top, then maybe that we might see a different outcome there. And when you consider, even if we play both of them up top, we've obviously got people like Wilfried and Townsend out wide who can put balls into the box. But also, even if we play with one of them in a 4-3-3, we just need to make sure we utilise people like Zaha and Townsend who are playing out wide so they can get balls in, because that will be so much more efficient. And it's worth a go, whether we play 2 up top or whether we even continue playing 1 up top and just put more balls into the box, it's got to be worth a go, especially because, touch wood now, we're obviously not 100% safe yet, but we're in a better position than we would have been if we would have drawn or lost this game. So hopefully now, because we're getting near the end of the season, we need to try these new things, Batshuayi and Benteke up top. And like I've said, a really big game against Tottenham at their new stadium. Hopefully we can spoil their party, which fingers crossed we might be able to do. But, like I've said, we need a performance like we had in the second half, where we were, taking chances, albeit not all of them, but we took our chances, like the Van Aanholt one at the end. But if we can do that, stay solid at the back, stay compact in the midfield, then maybe we have a chance. But, you never know. First game at a new stadium, anything could happen. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award, but before we do that, I give you my Man of the Match and why I thought the biggest influence in the game. I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now when you consider, our last sort of few games or so, that's obviously the Brighton game and the Watford game, they've obviously been very disappointing, not just in terms of the results we've got in the game, but in terms of the performances as well. And obviously I've talked quite a lot of detail in the last sort of few weeks or so about the disappointments of these games, what we should have done to improve, and just the fact that the other team essentially wanted it more than us. But actually it was nice to come into this game here after the international break, sort of a clean slate, players back from injury, and that was good to see. And yes, the result was quite positive, but it was only really the second half where Palace really looked to get into it, because the first half was really anyone could have done it. It was sort of 50-50. Huddersfield were quite good for some parts of it, but obviously the second half we basically took our control of the game and got the penalty and then eventually got the goal to kill off the game with Van Aanholt scoring in the 88th minute. So whilst games recently have been quite disappointing, not just the results but the performances, it was nice to see here where yes, the performance still wasn't great, especially in that first half. It was very disappointing, but the fact that in the second half we came out rejuvenated and done the job, that's what I'd want. If we have a bad performance, at least we go forth and do the job. So it was nice to see us go forth and do that. Now obviously going back to the 2 games, obviously the Brighton and Watford game, because of how bad it was pretty difficult to pick a Man of the Match award. But this performance here, like I've said, it was a much better performance, albeit not the best, especially first half. And actually I was able to put it down to 4 players who I think overall were quite crucial to us going forth and getting the win. So the 4 players I've gone with Gaeta, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Patrick Van Aanholt and Wilfried Zaha. So to start with Gaeta, quite simply, he got the clean sheet in the game, which of course is important for a goalkeeper. But the main thing I was impressed with is just the 5 decent saves in particular he made. Whenever Huddersfield had chances inside the box, he was getting down low, getting in the right positions to make these saves. And there was one in particular where the Huddersfield player got inside the box, cut it inside, was going to go bottom corner, and Gaeta made this leap right down to the low corner to save it in his left hand corner, or right hand side, whichever way you're looking at it, So the fact that he made loads of decent saves, especially ones that kept us in the game when it was at 0-0, was of course great to see. And certainly when Huddersfield was sort of in the ascendancy in the first half, when they had a few chances to make it 1-0, Gaeta stood up and made himself, basically made these really important saves in quick succession to keep us in the game. And obviously the fact that he combined that with an overall good performance, commanding in his area, albeit not the best, but commanding, few punches away inside the box, so he was good at clearing the danger there. So for me, Gaeta kept the clean sheet firstly, made 5 decent saves and a few other contributions in that respect, and of course some of his punches were also good as well in terms of just getting the danger out of the way. Now in terms of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, once again I really, he's on here almost every week now, and that's just because he never really fails to impress, and this was a performance once again that was impressive, and just goes to show that now he's got his run in the side, now he's being talked at, one of England's better right backs. He seems to be taking it in his stride and seems to be continuing with this brilliant run of form. Now when you consider he had an injury during the international break, the fact that he comes straight back into the side, having only trained on Friday, and perform as well as he did is a credit to him. But also you've got to look at the medical staff as well, you know, getting him up to that standard to play the game. Now, one of the things that I was really impressed with in this game here is that, yes, we weren't that great in the first half, but Wan-Bissaka was by far the standout player of that half, purely because when we were or Huddersfield were going forward, he was using his pace to get back, make slide-in challenges, get the ball off the opposition, and of course get forward as well. So that's obviously no different to what he's done recently, but the fact that he'd done it so effectively by actually, whenever Huddersfield were on the attack, he'd get back, use his pace, make the tackles, and then get the ball back, as well as combining that with winning several aerial duels was of course good to see. And to be honest, he just is an unreal defender, just because of the quality he's got. So for me, the fact that he was impressive once again, the fact that he put in another 8 out of 10 performances while I've put him on the shortlist. And there was one movement in particular where he literally won the ball back, which was going across the pitch, and then he cleared the ball up the pitch as well. And obviously I'm sure you've seen videos of that on Twitter, but the fact that he was so calm, running in from right back, getting the ball off the player inside the box, dribbling to the left hand side of the Palace pitch, then clearing the ball, that calmness and that sort of professionalism, I suppose, for such a young player, just once again goes to show his class, and obviously highlights how good his performance was overall. Now, moving on to the other side, I've gone with Patrick Van Aanholt, and for me, you know, he's been a player who I've criticised recently, but it was nice to see him, even though it wasn't his best performance, nice to see him get back on the score sheet. And essentially that's why I've put him on here, because he got that second goal to seal the win for us, and that was really important because many times this season we haven't been able to get that second goal to kill the game off. So it was nice for us to get that goal and obviously seal the win for us. But the main thing for me is just that in comparison to weeks gone by, the fact that he was making so many forward runs, he was linking up really well with Zaha, and yes, maybe he could have done a little bit better defensively, but the fact that we're seeing things from him that we haven't seen recently, the fact that he got on the score sheet with what was a very good finish, nice ball played through by Zaha, and obviously a great finish, you know, under the keeper's legs to make it 2-0. So not only was it the fact that he got the goal to seal us the win, but just that attacking intent, which of course has been missing from him recently. And like I've said, that link-up play down that left-hand side with Zaha was also really quite impressive. And I suppose that moves me nicely onto my final player, that is Wilfried Zaha. Now, obviously, aside from his attacking play, the fact that he got an assist, the fact that he won the penalty, I actually want to credit him for his defensive work, because I do think in that first half, he actually came back numerous times to essentially a left-back position to do defensive work. So I've got to give him credit for that, the fact that he came back defensively and done more than what his job is. And really for me is that was just because of we weren't really getting into the game much in the first half, which obviously meant that Huddersfield had a few more chances inside the box. So the fact that he worked hard, got back into a left back position, helped out the team defensively was of course good to see. But the thing that I really liked about his performance, and obviously this is a tactical thing from Hodgson, but as soon as he changed the team from a 4-3-3 to a 4-4-2, Zaha automatically improved because he was playing up top. Even though he sometimes came back, he didn't necessarily have to work on his defensive work or concentrate on that like he'd done in the first half, and that seemed to bring him into his element. He came alive in that second half, a class act essentially, you know, running at the back for of Huddersfield, looking to run in behind them. And like I've said, the fact that he won the penalty, obviously going from the box, going to have a shot taken down, no debates about that. And the fact that he had a no-look pass to Van Aanholt for him to score Palace's second goal was of course good to see. So whilst only one of them would count as an assist, you know, in my eyes, you know, the fact that he won a penalty as well, that's another assist, which if you look at his season, 8 goals and 8 assists if you include penalties. So of course, once again, building up these stats just to show, you know, a class act he is. But like I said, great skill to win the penalty. Probably should have scored when he was on one-on-one, but the fact that he made up for that with that no-look pass, which eventually helped us to you know, basically win the game, you know, kill the game off, was of course good to see. But like I've said, all 4 of these players obviously do deserve credit, and maybe there are a few other players which you may debate should also be on here. But like I've said, you know, Vicente Gaeta for the saves he made and his contribution, especially at 0-0 to help us get the clean sheet. Obviously, Wan-Bissaka and Patrick Van Aanholt for their work at their respective fullback roles. Obviously, Aaron Wan-Bissaka just impressive in terms of his sliding challenges, and Van Aanholt impressive in terms of his ability to get far forward, and of course Wilfried Zaha just for his general attacking play, and in that first half just for that contribution he made defensively as well. So of course feel free to comment below with your man of the match, who you would give your man of the match to. But for me, I think there's only one winner here, and even though he got a lower player rating than say someone else did in the team, I'm going to give it to Vicente Gaeta. So congratulations Gaeta. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from you. Now obviously for me it was between Wan-Bissaka and Gaeta, and the only reason I've given it to Gaeta as opposed to Wan-Bissaka, even though I've given 1 and 8 in the player ratings and 1 and 7, is just because of how important Gaeta was in terms of keeping that clean sheet, especially at 0-0. Because of course Wan-Bissaka, I gave him an 8, and throughout the whole game he was fantastic, but at key moments where we could have gone 1-0 down, could have gone 2-0 down, the amount of chances Huddersfield had, the fact that Gaeta made these saves and they actually counted and they made a difference to us actually, keeping the game at 0-0 and eventually going on to win it 2-0. For me, that importance in terms of making these crucial saves, crucial punches away, is why I've given it to him. But like I said already, Wan-Bissaka, Aanholt and Zaha obviously all deserve credit for their performances here. And like I've said, Wan-Bissaka and Aanholt for the defensive work, and of course Aanholt in terms of his ability to get forward, and Zaha just for his overall class act in that second half in terms of just being a threat to the Huddersfield back line. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson and Aanholt following the game.
Patrick, how happy are you to have got that victory today?
Yeah, it was a long time coming. It was a tough game. We knew it was going to be a tough game today because they like to keep the ball, and that's what they did. They came here and I think they kept it good. They played good football and make it very difficult for us. They pressed us high so we couldn't play, so we played a long ball and not depth from there. And unfortunately, until the penalty, they did a very good job. And then, we knew it wasn't going to be 90 minutes long. They could defend. So I was just waiting for my chance and we got it.
Yeah, they were playing for their Premier League lives today. Could you sense that from the start?
Didn't know, but like I said, the way they played today, they showed that they are capable of playing anyone in the league, and they showed good character today. So.
And the manager made a change at half time, went from 4-3-3 to 4-4-2. How did that help you guys?
I think the extra man in midfield helped us, because they were playing 4-4-2, I think, and because their midfielders were like close to each other. And in the first half we had difficulty with that, but I think in the second half we adapt, change system, and create a lot of chances.
You must have felt the goal was never going to come at one point. There's so many chances.
Yeah, obviously you think that, but you keep going. You keep believing in yourself, keep believing in your teammates, and that's what we did. We believed in each other, believed in the team, and we knew we were going to score. And unfortunately, it was from the penalty, and then I scored the second one. Yeah,
Brighty mentioned in the week he had a feeling this game was going to be similar to the one against Hull a couple of years ago. You scored one then, but this goal was even better, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's always nice to be on the score sheet. It's been a long time coming for me, and but like I said, it's always nice to be on the score sheet. But we got a clean sheet today as well, so it's extra bonus.
Certainly feels like a really significant win for Crystal Palace.
Well, I feel relief because I thought first half we were nothing like what we wanted to be, and Huddersfield were playing well. So fortunately, they weren't, creating an enormous mass of goal chances, but certainly had better possession. They looked in control. We looked out of sorts. We didn't seem to find our passing and our movement like we normally like to do. So I must say, at half-time things were looking very bleak. But we made a couple of tweaks to our system and moved Wilf up front, which was, of course, the major one. And I thought we did much better second half. But still, it was a very nervous moment. It took us to the 74th minute till we eventually got the breakthrough. We'd missed a couple of hair-raisingly good chances, in my opinion, before that. But I mean, that goal that we scored from the penalty was such a relief, really. And then the second one, of course, put the game to bed. But congratulations to Huddersfield. I mean, I know that today they've been technically relegated, but they must be quite proud of their performance because they certainly tested us today. And we weren't really able to meet that test in the first half. I thought we did second half. So in the end, we're happy that we've got the result. And as you rightly say, it does lift us to 36 points, which, depending upon the result tomorrow with Cardiff and Chelsea, might see us with a decent margin to the team that's third from bottom. And now we have 7 games to improve our position.
How do you view that buffer now to the bottom 3?
Well, it depends how big the buffer is. I mean, at the moment it's 8 points, but it could be only 5 points if Cardiff beat Chelsea tomorrow. So that's not a great buffer. But, points are hard to come by in this league. And, sometimes we underestimate that. The teams that have now got to get something like 9 or 10 or 11 points from 6 or 7 games, they haven't been able to do that in 32 games. So they're not averaging a point a game. So we're asking them to average a lot more than a point a game than what they've done so far. So a buffer is a very, very important buffer. But we certainly aren't relaxed. We certainly aren't proud of our performance today because we know we can do much better. But we are really delighted, and I thought the team showed an awful lot of character, an awful lot of courage and determination second half. And luckily, the players like Wilfried, Zaha, who are match winners for us, they came to the fore.
And he brought about that penalty that Luka Milivojevic dispatched so efficiently. And that's the moment you need a calm head, isn't it, from your leading scorer?
Absolutely. I mean, you always worry with penalties. I don't know, when I say you, perhaps I'm the only manager in the league that's worried when a penalty is awarded, because even though I fully trust my penalty taker and fully believe he's going to score, I always see him missing as well. But there was no danger of that. It was a perfect penalty, and Wilf did ever so well to win the penalty for us. And I thought second half, when he moved up, into a more of a forward position rather than a wide forward position, he asked an awful lot of questions, and he started to show the level of quality that the man has. I thought first half we didn't get anything like what we would like to get out of him.
And you've seen so much in football that I'm sure that you will have an element of sympathy for Huddersfield tonight as well, having been relegated from the Premier League.
Oh, absolutely. And what's more, the way they've gone about the season and the misfortune they've had, really, in terms of the results not matching the level of their performances, that must be very hard to take for them. But I would think it bodes very well for next season for them. If they can keep this squad more or less together with the type of football they play and the organisation and determination they have, they must be thinking, well, yeah, this year it didn't quite go our way, because we're in a very unforgiving league. I don't know there are many leagues in the world quite as unforgiving as the Premier League. So if things go against you, as it did for them fairly early on, it's so hard to clamber back and get into those positions where you can make a difference. But if I was the Huddersfield manager, I'd be very proud of my team's performance today. I'd be absolutely gutted that it didn't give any points, which it so easily could have done. And I consider myself fortunate to be standing here having seen my players, the Crystal Palace players, show that Crystal Palace spirit in the second half, show that Crystal Palace character, and to come back from the first half, which did not look good for us at all, to turn it into a victorious afternoon.
It's a big win for your side. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson and Aanholt had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Huddersfield. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Tottenham. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.